Hello and welcome back. We are officially starting off our content here. We are going to be working with the software development lifecycle. Oh, there goes my little mouse thing. Okay, so let's start off the course here with learning about the software development lifecycle, different types of software development models, and sort of the agile mindset. All right. So what actually is the software development lifecycle? Basically, it's going to be this structured process that we use, that companies use to develop software applications. So it starts, of course, with planning. Then we design based on those plans. We can now code once we have a design in place. We can test our code. Then we can release our code. And then, of course, we can hit maintenance mode where we can sort of maintain our product or potentially fix problems and add new features and things like that. So each of these different phases do sort of have some basic sort of key points that come with them, some core concepts. So when we're in that planning phase, we're talking about gathering requirements, and this is often client facing. So in this course, we don't really have a client. We are going to put our client hat on and pretend to be the client. But in the real world, we do have people whose job it is to go out into the world, meet with clients, gather their requirements, figure out what kind of project they need built, and who it's going to serve and what kind of features they require. And that's going to be all of that upfront sort of planning phase. The next phase is our design phase. And this isn't just about UI. It's not just talking about designing what the page will look like, but we're also talking about just the general flow and intuitiveness of the pages together. So the design as a whole needs to encompass things like the behaviors, what it will look like, how the different pieces are going to connect to each other. It does include UI, but it's not just UI. There's definitely a lot more that to sort of the design phase of the software development lifecycle. Next is implementation. Now, implementation is, of course, coding, and coding doesn't mean, cowboy coding. We're not going to test anything. We're just going to write a bunch of stuff and hope it doesn't break, everyone else's code. It does still involve some testing. So this is sort of in terms of implementation, our coding here and our testing is done by our developer team, right? So these are going to be automated tests, our unit tests. For those of you who have taken, some of the courses that involve testing, we have our black box testing and our white box testing. There's ways that we can sort of make sure that we're testing our code as we implement it. Then we have our actual testing phase. This looks different depending on the product, of course. Some teams have like a quality assurance team, have a quality assurance person whose job it is actually is to go in and run tests and do some manual testing. There's also the different ways to sort of go about testing in this stage. We have alpha and beta testing. Maybe we release to a small group of people. Maybe we have focus groups who try out our product, right? This doesn't necessarily mean testing at such a low level the way it did in implementation, but it also doesn't have to necessarily mean just in-house testing either. Next is the release stage. There's not really any words associated with this. We release our code, right? We are excited and we release. That's all there is to it. And of course, then we have our maintenance phase. Our maintenance phase has no active development. So it's not that we don't maintain our product, right? Of course we do. We're going to clean it up. There maybe are some left behind to-dos. There may be some very minor adjustments that need to be made or bugs that need to be fixed. But we're not looking at, brand new big giant features and adding like really big flashy new stuff. This is like an opportunity on the other side of the release, the cool down mode, where we can just sort of maintain our product. And back, without dating myself too much, back in the day, we had these 6 different stages of the software development lifecycle, and they kind of ran simplistically one after another. So we really did start in one phase, leave that phase, and then start the next phase, right? And then when we hit maintenance mode, we had this really lovely product at the end of it. But of course, in today's world, we know that our development is not quite so straightforward, not quite so linear. And products are constantly evolving and changing, and patches are coming out and edits and new enhancements. And so it's not quite so simple as just going from step 1 planning to step 6 maintenance and then calling our product done anymore. But these stages sort of are still alive in their own form in today's industry. Um, so modern teams have a lot of overlap. But again, if we're going to talk purely simplistic, right, we're going to start just talking about the most pure form of the software development lifecycle. We're looking at the planning stage being done by individuals known as business analysts. They are client facing. They might talk with the development team. They might not. Honestly, it sort of just depends on the company and the requirements. But their job is to go out and ask the right questions and gather the information from the client. And then we have our designers. These are going to be potentially our graphic designers. They might be our, where are they? Oh, I can't point all the way over there. Oh, all the way over there. I can do it with this. Right here. Does my pointer show up? There we go. Right here, our designers, our graphic designers. So they are the individuals who actually help us create a cohesive looking page, defining those behaviors, that flow of information, stuff like that. Of course, we have coding, implementation. That's us as developers. Not much needs to be said there. We know who we are. Testing is going to be done by, as I previously mentioned, possibly a quality assurance analyst. Um, Sometimes, though, it is a developer role. Sometimes the testing phase can be done by developers as well. Or maybe it's also done, again, by like a small group of beta clients or a focus group or something like that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be done by somebody whose like official role is quality assurance, but sometimes it is. Next is release. Now, release is often owned by the DevOps team or a SysOps team, something like that, right? Development operations, system operations. They're the ones whose job it is to actually get our code packaged up and pushed out into the world. We will do pretend little mini releases as part of our project in this course, but it's nice to sort of understand that that is like a separate team that often is responsible for that. Again, not everywhere. Modern teams, way more overlap. But there are sort of some companies that do market specific positions that are related to the development operations. And then lastly, we have maintenance, and such a funny joke, right? Interns, um, kind of jokes, kind of actually serious. Sometimes maintenance is done by the developers, but often maintenance mode is sort of like this idea of like keeping the lights on. And it's a really good way to get to know a project because in maintenance mode, you're not doing any targeted development. You are maintaining the project as a whole. So yes, this is often done by developers or a mix of individuals if things come up and, maybe business analysts have to get involved or the designers need to sort of reconstruct something. And so we sort of see it start to span the product and the different roles. Okay, so like I mentioned, the original software development lifecycle was quite rigid, and you had each of these sort of phases within it. And we have different methodologies when it comes to developing software, and one of which is known as waterfall. And it was this idea, this rigid idea of starting one phase, finishing it, getting approval on it, and then moving to the next phase. Once we started that once you like got started on the next phase, so let's say we started the development, it actually became quite expensive to go back and change to the graphic designer phase, right? Often we're talking about teams that would contract designers, contract developers. And so once that contract was over, it was very expensive to rehire them and to ask them to come and make changes. Which means, if you follow that very rigid structure, we'll talk more about it in the next video, but things happen, like you reach the public and things go wrong and realize you missed a key component and you no longer have the team together that did that work. And we never had a chance to test it prior either. It went out into the world well before anybody approved the design, right? So we approved the design, but we're not the target users possibly. We didn't have any real world users looking at pieces in those earlier stages because it was a waterfall going from top to bottom. If you're interested in a real world impact example, I have one here. You can pause the video and pull up that link. It's pretty interesting. So is this idea of the software development lifecycle outdated? And the answer is no, it's not. It's still used today. It's just been adapted into these modern frameworks, right? So some industries do still rely on this idea of the waterfall methodology, this top down. Some examples of those industries are like aerospace, defense, government, health, and finance. Lots of those do sort of still live in this waterfall or hybrid waterfall methodology sort of environment, whereas others have adapted these stages to just work better for their needs, um, to work better for developing, successful and flexible products. What again, we're going to sort of talk about in the next video, in the coming videos, that some have started to modify this software development lifecycle. We do have this idea of legacy systems, which we'll talk more about way later in the course, but many of these legacy systems are built on more rigid plans, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad or not able to use a more modified version going forward. Lots of healthcare tech is more regulated, but it still often gets sort of staged as this waterfall plans. So we're still going to sort of have those planning phases and those design phases that sort of start off as pretty rigid in how we go about them. And then there becomes more of like a flexible, cyclical phase management style for the rest of the project, for the rest of the development cycle there. So we can really see here that software development lifecycle, although it's called software development, isn't just talking about developers. There's lots of people involved, and it's not just the implementation either, right? We're talking about sort of involving lots of people in this cycle, in this process, to sort of go from no product all the way to product at the end. So if you think a little bit about the courses you've taken thus far, pardon me, I want you to just sort of pause for a minute. I try to put these pause and reflect ideas at the ends of each of my videos, just for an opportunity to sort of engage in what's called a reflective practice, a reflective educational journey, really helps solidify your understanding of these. So which software development life cycle stages have you worked on in your other classes, and which ones feel new to you? So perhaps you've taken a human-computer interaction course where you did some design or some planning, depending on who you took even Comp 1010 with, right? Your introductory computer class, you may have had an opportunity to do some design stuff and some testing. Just because depending on who taught it, there are different ways to engage with each of those stages. Let me think, what else might we have done? Databases, right? If you've taken your Comp 3380 course at this point, yes, you've done some implementation in it, but tons of upfront design goes into designing those databases, right? So we can sort of see how, even though we've never had a name for this before, we have sort of touched on these different life cycle phases, pardon me, in our educational journey so far. Okay, so really thinking about that, keeping those in mind as we go into the next video. We're going to talk more about the software development lifecycle and different methodologies, so different ways of implementing it. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.